Hello there, and welcome to Depths of Unknown. The ocean is not silent. This is not a metaphor, and it is not a poetic observation. It is a literal physical fact that took humanity most of its history to properly understand, and whose implications, once understood, opened one of the strangest chapters in the science of sound. Water is a medium that transmits sound approximately 4.5 times faster than air, and the ocean, covering 70% of the planet's surface and extending to depths of nearly 11 kilometers at its deepest point, is filled from surface to floor with sound, the sound of breaking waves and undersea landslides, of marine mammals calling across thousands of kilometers, of submarine volcanoes and hydrothermal vents, of earthquakes and ice, of the biological chorus of millions of organisms communicating, hunting, navigating, and simply existing in the dark. The first serious systematic attempt to listen to the deep ocean came during the Second World War, when the United States Navy deployed a network of hydrophones, underwater microphones, across the Atlantic and Pacific seabeds as part of an effort to detect Soviet submarines. The network was called SOSUS, the Sound Surveillance System, and when it began recording in the 1950s, it picked up something that no one had planned to find. Alongside the engine noise of passing ships and the faint signatures of distant submarines, the SOS network recorded sounds whose origins were unclear, whose frequencies were sometimes below the range of human hearing, whose patterns suggested purpose or process, and whose explanations, when explanations finally came, and some have still not come, required the invention of entirely new frameworks for understanding what the ocean is producing and why. The story of the strange sounds recorded under the ocean is the story of an acoustic universe that existed in perfect ignorance of the humans above it, producing its sounds for millions of years before anything capable of listening for them was put in place to hear. The speed of sound in water is not uniform, and this non-uniformity is the key to understanding how sound travels through the deep ocean and why the hydrophone networks placed on the seafloor can detect sounds from extraordinary distances. At a depth of approximately 1,000 meters in most ocean basins, there exists a layer in which the speed of sound reaches a minimum, a zone where the competing effects of temperature, pressure, and salinity on sound velocity produce a channel in which sound is trapped and guided horizontally around the planet with remarkably little energy loss. This channel is called the SOFA channel, the sound fixing and ranging channel, and it behaves as a natural acoustic waveguide, bending sound rays that enter it back toward the channel center through refraction rather than allowing them to escape upward or downward. The SOFA channel was discovered during the Second World War and was initially proposed as a system for rescuing downed pilots at sea. A pilot who reached the ocean could detonate a small explosive charge whose sound would travel through the SOFA channel and be detected by hydrophone stations thousands of kilometers away, allowing his position to be triangulated. The rescue system was never fully deployed for its original purpose, but the importance of the SOFA channel to the acoustic behavior of the ocean was immediately recognized, and it became the conceptual foundation of all subsequent deep ocean acoustic monitoring. A sound produced at the right depth anywhere in the ocean can travel through the SOFA channel to a receiver on the other side of the planet, not weakened to silence by the inverse square law that governs sound in open three-dimensional space, but guided and sustained in a two-dimensional channel that loses energy far more slowly. The SOFA channel became the medium through which some of the most extraordinary sounds ever recorded in the natural world have traveled, carrying the acoustic signatures of geological events, biological activity, and phenomena whose character remains incompletely understood across ocean basins and between continents. One of the most famous sounds in the history of underwater acoustics was recorded by the United States National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration's Autonomous Hydrophone Array in the Equatorial Pacific in May 1997. The sound lasted approximately 1 minute, was detected simultaneously by sensors separated by thousands of kilometers, and reached a sound pressure level high enough to be recorded across the entire Pacific basin, making it, at the time of its detection, the loudest underwater sound ever recorded. NOAA scientists who analyzed the recording named it the bloop, The characteristic that made the bloop immediately puzzling was its frequency profile. The sound showed a rapid increase in frequency over its duration, a swooping rise in pitch that was unusual for geological sources like volcanic eruptions or earthquake events, which typically produce broader, less structured frequency signatures. The unusual frequency sweep prompted speculation, and for several years the bloop occupied a peculiar position in popular science coverage as an unexplained deep ocean sound, its origin genuinely unknown and its character sufficiently unusual to generate serious scientific discussion about whether it could represent the acoustic signature of a very large biological organism. NOAA scientists eventually concluded, based on the comparison with sounds produced by large Antarctic icebergs as they calve, crack, and grind against each other and against the seafloor, that the bloop was most likely produced by icequake activity, the acoustic output of a large iceberg fracturing or grinding, amplified and transmitted through the SOFAR channel across the Pacific. The conclusion is accepted by most oceanographers, but the bloop remains one of the most discussed sounds in the history of underwater acoustic monitoring. The oceans have produced other recorded sounds whose origins were initially unclear and whose eventual explanations were in some cases more surprising than the speculations they replaced. A sound recorded in 1997 by the same NOAA hydrophone network and named the slowdown is a descending frequency sweep, a sound that drops in pitch over approximately 7 minutes that has been detected multiple times and at multiple locations in the Pacific. Its origin has been attributed to Antarctic ice, specifically to the grounding and sliding of large icebergs on the shallow Antarctic shelf. But the consistency of its frequency pattern and the regularity with which it recurs has kept it a subject of ongoing study. A sound named the train, recorded repeatedly in the equatorial Pacific, produces a nearly constant frequency with slow amplitude variations that give it a rhythmic quality. Its origin is considered geological, associated with submarine volcanic activity, but its regularity is unusual for geological sources. A sound named the Julia, recorded in March 1999 across the entire Pacific hydrophone network, was a rising sound of approximately 15 seconds whose origin has been attributed to a large iceberg grounding on the Antarctic seafloor, but the sheer amplitude of the recording, audible across the entire Pacific, placed it among the most powerful naturally occurring underwater sound events in the observational record. A sound named the upsweep, first detected in August 1991 and still being recorded by NOAA hydrophones as of recent years, is a seasonal sound. It reaches its maximum amplitude in spring and autumn, consisting of narrow-band upsweeping tones that have been associated with volcanic activity on the Pacific Antarctic ridge, but whose specific source has never been precisely located. The sounds that are best understood in the underwater acoustic record are those produced by marine mammals, and the study of these sounds has produced one of the most remarkable bodies of science in modern biology. The blue whale, the largest animal that has ever lived on Earth, produces calls that are among the lowest frequency sounds made by any animal, calls that fall in the frequency range of 10 to 40 Hz, below the lower limit of human hearing at around 20 Hz, and that carry across ocean basins at the levels permitted by the SOFAR channel. A blue whale calling in the Central Pacific has been detected by hydrophones in the North Atlantic, the calls having traveled through the SOFAR channel around the curvature of the Earth with sufficient amplitude to be clearly distinguishable from background noise. The function of these long-range calls is understood to be primarily related to mate finding. The calls of male blue whales are thought to be acoustic advertisements that convey the caller's location and potentially his size and condition to females across distances of thousands of kilometers. The fin whale produces a 20 Hz call of extraordinary regularity that was the subject of decades of scientific puzzlement before its biological origin was confirmed. The regularity and persistence of fin whale calling was so unusual that early researchers considered geological and technological explanations before the biological source was established. Humpback whales produce the most complex vocalizations in the cetacean acoustic repertoire, long, elaborately structured songs that can last for 20 minutes or longer. that change gradually over the course of a breeding season as males modify their songs in response to each other, and that propagate as acoustic fashions across entire ocean basins, with new song elements spreading from whale to whale through a process that functions like the horizontal transmission of cultural information. More recently, oceanographers studying decades of continuous hydrophone recordings have found that the frequency of blue whale calls has been decreasing consistently over the past 50 years. Each population's calls have shifted downward by a fraction of a hertz per year, in a long-term trend that has been documented in every population of blue whales on Earth. The cause of this frequency shift is debated, but the most widely accepted explanation is that it reflects the recovery of blue whale populations since the end of commercial whaling. As population density increases, males may reduce the frequency of their calls as competition for acoustic space decreases. The sperm whale produces a completely different class of underwater sound, the click, a broadband acoustic pulse used in echolocation that is the loudest sound produced by any animal on Earth. Sperm whale clicks can reach sound pressure levels of over 230 decibels, a figure that, when converted from the underwater sound scale to the air sound scale, represents a sound of genuinely extraordinary physical intensity, an intensity sufficient to stun or disorient the squid and fish that the whale is hunting in the deep ocean darkness. The clicks are produced by the spermaceti organ in the whale's enormous rectangular head, an organ filled with a waxy liquid whose precise acoustic function took decades of research to understand, involving a complex system of air sacs and reflective surfaces that focus and amplify the click before it leaves the whale's head and travels outward into the water. Sperm whales produce distinctive click patterns called codas that function as social identity markers. Groups of sperm whales share coda repertoires, and different populations have different dialects of codas that allow researchers to identify the cultural affiliations of individual whales from their acoustic signatures alone. The existence of cultural dialects in sperm whale acoustic communication is one of the most remarkable findings in cetacean biology, suggesting a level of acoustic cultural complexity in a non-human species that has no parallel in the animal kingdom outside of certain primate social systems. These dialects are learned, not innate. Young sperm whales acquire their coda repertoire by listening to the adults in their social group, in a process that is functionally analogous to the way human children acquire language from the people around them. Below the sounds of marine mammals, below the geological events and the iceberg grinding and the submarine volcanic eruptions, the ocean produces a continuous background of sound whose sources are distributed across every depth and every region of the sea. The biological sound of the ocean's smallest organisms, the snapping shrimp, which produce impulsive sounds by the rapid closure of a specialized claw that creates a cavitation bubble whose collapse generates a sharp crack, is so pervasive in tropical and subtropical waters that the combined sound of snapping shrimp populations creates a continuous crackling background noise that has been compared to the sound of frying food, and that is audible to any diver who stops to listen in warm, shallow water. The collective sound of snapping shrimp is loud enough to interfere with sonar systems and has historically disrupted submarine detection efforts in tropical waters, a phenomenon that was initially a source of genuine confusion for Navy acoustic operators who could not reconcile the intensity of the crackling noise with any known submarine or geological source. Fish produce sounds too. The dawn and dusk choruses of fish species communicating in coastal and reef environments produce acoustic events that rise sharply above the background at sunrise and sunset. The fish equivalent of the bird chorus that marks the transition between day and night in terrestrial environments. The midshipman fish of the Pacific coast produces a sustained humming tone during its breeding season that has been described by houseboat owners as the sound of a motor running below the hull. A sound that comes and goes with the seasons, produced by thousands of fish vibrating their swim bladders simultaneously in a breeding chorus that can be heard through the hulls of boats and the floors of floating structures. The combination of all biological sound in the ocean, from the sub-20 Hz calls of blue whales to the broadband clicks of echolocating dolphins to the collective crackling of shrimp and the dusk choruses of reef fish, constitutes what ocean acousticians call the biological noise floor. a continuous acoustic presence that defines the sonic character of every part of the ocean where life exists. What the archive of underwater sound accumulated across 70 years of continuous hydrophone recording, from the first SOS-US deployments through the current era of autonomous hydrophone arrays and deep-sea acoustic observatories, ultimately reveals is that the ocean has been producing sounds whose character, whose variety, and whose complexity far exceed what anyone listening for submarines expected to find. Some of these sounds are now well explained, their sources identified and their mechanisms understood. The bloop is ice. The Julia is ice. The upsweep is most likely volcanic. The train is geological. The blue whale's declining frequency is the acoustic record of a species recovering from near extinction. The sperm whale's codas are dialects, learned and transmitted culturally across generations. The crackling that fills tropical shallows is the collective voice of billions of small shrimp living their compressed and violent lives in warm, shallow water. These are explanations. They are not diminishments. Knowing that the bloop was an iceberg fracturing does not make the recording less extraordinary. It makes it more so, because what the recording reveals is that an iceberg fracturing on the Antarctic seafloor produced a sound powerful enough to be detected simultaneously by hydrophones distributed across the entire Pacific Ocean, which means the ocean itself is an acoustic instrument of planetary scale, capable of transmitting events at one end of the world to sensors at the other end with a fidelity and a range that no human-built communication system has ever matched. Some sounds remain genuinely uncertain, their origins attributed to geological or glaciological processes with degrees of confidence that fall short of complete certainty. And some, the rarest, the most anomalous, the ones that appear only once or twice in the entire recording archive, remain unexplained in the full sense of that word. Not because the ocean is producing sounds of mysterious origin, but because the ocean is large and deep and incompletely monitored, and because the acoustic phenomena that 70 years of listening have revealed represent only a fraction of what the deep water is producing in the darkness below the reach of light, in frequencies below the range of unaided human hearing, across distances that make the ocean a single, continuous acoustic space that the land-adapted senses of our species were never designed to navigate or comprehend, and that the ocean has been filling with sound, patiently and without audience, for longer than anything capable of listening has existed on this planet.